Yes, sir. At once.
Waiting order. Reporting. Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Waiting order. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Report. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Affirmative.
Reporting. Affirmative. Yes, sir. At
Yes,
once.
sir. Affirmative.
Waiting order. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Acknowledged. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Yes, sir. Of course. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. Yes, sir.
Acknowledged.
Reporting. Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. 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 Very well.
Comrade. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Comrade. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. Of course. Yes, sir. Of course. Yes, sir. Agreed. Yes, sir. Very well. At once. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Of course. Agreed. Agreed.
Waiting order. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. At once.
Yes, sir.
Acknowledged. Waiting
Orders.
at once. Very well. Affirmative. Yes, sir. At once.
Acknowledged.
Reporting once. Affirmative.
Waiting order.
Waiting
Very
order.
well.
Affirmative. Very well.
Reporting.
Acknowledged. Agreed. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Comrade.
Ready
At
at once.
once. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Comrade. Affirmative.
Awaiting orders.
Affirmative.
Vehicle report.
Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Comrade. Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Acknowledged.
Comrade. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Vehicle reporting.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Vehicle report.
Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative.
Reporting. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Reporting. Acknowledged.
Reporting. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Vehicle report.
Acknowledged. Reporting.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Waiting order. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Reporting.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Reporting. Acknowledged.
Vehicle reporting.
Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Waiting order. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Reporting. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Reporting. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Comrade. Acknowledged. Yes, sir.
Vehicle
Yes,
report.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Waiting
Awaiting
order.
orders.
Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Vehicle reporting.
Waiting order.
Yes,
Affirmative.
sir. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Reporting.
Reporting. Waiting order. Yes, sir. Comrade?
Yes, sir.
Acknowledged. Waiting order. Affirmative.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Awaiting
Reporting.
orders.
Affirmative. Reporting.
Awaiting orders.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Reporting. Acknowledged. Comrade?
Yes,
Acknowledged.
sir. Affirmative. Report acknowledged.
Comrade? Acknowledged.
Report acknowledged.
Warning.
Yes,
4
sir. Acknowledged.
minutes remaining.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Reporting.
Acknowledged.
Waiting order.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Awaiting orders.
Acknowledged.
Report acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Warning.
Affirmative.
3 minutes
Comrade?
remaining.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Reporting. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Comrade? Yes, sir.
Awaiting orders.
Naval unit lost. Naval unit lost.
Yes, sir.
Warning. 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Naval unit lost.
Yes, sir. Reporting. Reporting. Affirmative. Reporting. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Comrade? Affirmative.
Warning. 1
Reporting.
minute remaining.
Yes, sir.
Comrade? Acknowledged. Waiting order. Waiting order. Acknowledged. Reporting.
Reporting. Agreed.
Reinforcements
Yes,
have
sir.
arrived.
Reporting. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Of course. Ready. Affirmative. At once. Agreed. Yes, sir. Very well. Very well. At once. Yes, sir. At once. Very well. Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Reinforcements have
Agreed.
arrived.
Affirmative. Yes, sir. At once.
Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Ready and waiting.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Ready and waiting. Reporting. Very well. Agreed.
Yes, sir.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Yes, sir.
Awaiting orders.
Reporting. Acknowledged.
Vehicle acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Reporting. Acknowledged. Vehicle reporting. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. At once. Agreed. Very well.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Of course. Affirmative.
Comrade?
Reporting. At once.
Yes, sir.
Reporting.
Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Agreed. Reporting. Agreed.
Reinforcements have
Acknowledged.
arrived.
Reporting. Very well. Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Acknowledged.
Acknowledged.
Very well. Yes, sir. At once. Yes, sir. Of course. Affirmative. Very well. Very well. Affirmative. 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 Yes, sir. At once. Affirmative. Of course. Very well.
Waiting affirmative.
Yes, sir. At once. At once. Affirmative. At once. Affirmative.
Vehicle reporting.
Reporting.
Comrade? Affirmative. Comrade? Acknowledged.
Reporting. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Waiting order. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. At once. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. Very well. Agreed. Very well. At once. Affirmative. At once.
Reporting.
Ready and waiting. Affirmative. Very well. Agreed.
Waiting order.
Acknowledged.
Comrade, acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Waiting order.
Everything scorched earth.
Acknowledged.
Give him help. Give him help. I'm afraid we've failed.
Yes, sir. Comrade. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. At once. Agreed. Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Awaiting orders. Awaiting orders.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative. Waiting order. Affirmative.
Reporting. At once. At once. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Very well. Affirmative. Once. Very well. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Of course. At once. Affirmative. 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 At once. Agreed. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. At once. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. Yes, sir. At once. Very well. Affirmative. Of course. Affirmative. At once. Very well. At once. At once. Yes, sir. Of course. At once. Very well. Yes, sir. Very well. At once. At once. Affirmative. 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 Agreed. At once. Affirmative. Agreed. Very well. Very well. Very well. Agreed. At once. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. At once. Agreed. Agreed. Very well. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Agreed. Very well.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Vehicle reporting.
Waiting affirmative.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Affirmative. Vehicle reporting. Acknowledged.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Waiting.
Affirmative. Vehicle
Affirmative.
reporting. Engineering.
Yes, sir.
Ready and waiting.
Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Awaiting
Acknowledged.
Waiting order. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Waiting order. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Comrade. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Reporting.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Awaiting
Affirmative.
orders.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Acknowledged.
Waiting
Acknowledged.
order. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes,
Acknowledged.
sir. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Yes,
Acknowledged.
affirmative. Acknowledged.
Lost.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Reporting. Reporting. Awaiting orders. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Comrade, sir.
Yes, sir. Awaiting orders. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Vehicle acknowledged, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Reporting. Yes, sir.
Unit lost.
Acknowledged, sir. Acknowledged. Vehicle acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Engineering. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Vehicle acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Reporting. Comrade.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Vehicle
Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Lost.
Report. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Reporting. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Awaiting. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Vehicle reporting.
Affirmative.
Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Reporting. Very well.
Reporting. Reporting. Acknowledged. Reporting.
Waiting for
Acknowledged.
orders. Comrade.
Reporting.
Comrade. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Vehicle reporting. Acknowledged.
Acknowledged. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Reporting. Yes, sir. Engineering. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Engineering. Affirmative.
Waiting for very well.
Waiting orders. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Comrade.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Got juice? Lights out.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Juice? Let's dance.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Comrade. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Mission accomplished.